Has started.
Hey everybody, this is Scott Crowder, and I'm here with three friends that I'm eager to share a conversation with you that some of you were tracking, that we've shared two videos in the last few weeks, really in the wake of what's been happening in our country as race is being talked about probably the most since the civil rights movement in the 60s. And we are all aware that God is doing something, and it's bigger. As we just prayed before our call, it's bigger than just bringing down statues. It's really about healing hearts. So we have a mutual connection because we all went to Elim Bible Institute in college back around the turn of the century, if I could say it that way. And we are that old, but we are youthful in heart. And I want to introduce, first of all, Keith Reynolds. Keith was at Elam from 95 to 98. He was my senior class president. And Keith is at Western Theological Seminary these days, working in the admin department, and is doing great work in the kingdom in many ways. Another one is David Ham, uh, who was my best man at my wedding, and I was his best man, and we were pretty tough two on two basketball. So I have to put that out there. David went to Elam from 95 to 97. He is on staff as a pastor at Times Square Church in New York City, and you're going to hear more from him. And then Gerald Coleman. Gerald and I mixed it up on the basketball court. I wish we had connected more when we were at Elam. As we've been reconnecting recently, we find the Lord stirring our hearts in many similar ways. Gerald was at Elam from 97 to 2000, and he is now the campus pastor at Roberts Wesleyan College. I think we should also add that we all either found or went to school with our wives at Elim Bible Institute and College. So Elam for us is integral to even our family story, as David and I even have parents that went to Elam. And today we just really wanted to talk about what is coming up in this season as we talk about race and reconciliation and what was our experience in the past and what God is doing in the future. So I just opened it up immediately. We were having some good dialogue before we hit record. What's coming up in your hearts, guys, as we talk about race today and our time at Elam?
Well, first, I'd like
Uh,
to say, oh, go ahead, Keith.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, I just wanted to say we've had some really good conversation offline, and I'm
Yeah.
just blessed by my brothers and this opportunity again to do this. It's been uh, nourishing for me in a lot of ways to talk about what's going on presently and to talk about our journey together, and to reflect back on just our time together at Elam and what that looked like for us, just as men, men of faith, as students. And I'm just grateful for this opportunity again, just have this conversation from a biblical worldview, and to have this conversation with brothers who I just really admire in regards to what they're just doing in life and who they are. Yeah.
Yeah. I say amen to that. It is always good. I mean, what it's the persons involved that make conversation sweet. And if that is in fact the case, this is going to be a sweet conversation. And like all good conversations, my hope is that it draws others into it and that it inspires ongoing conversations where people have influence with others. That something we say, a question that is posed resonates, and it prompts ongoing conversation with with others in the places where they have influence. But the thing that comes up for me as
Yeah.
we kind of are beset with you know uh, I guess of this issue of race and how it is manifest in this season is just the need for honest and robust discussions. with trusted persons, conversation where we can be honest about our pain, honest about our gripe and frustration, honest about our ambivalence. And when I think of my growing experiences, the books, the people, the communities that have contributed to the person that I am, Elim's influence looms large. And when I think about the way in which citizens in America have historically responded to issues of race, I just think about what are the contributing factors that have empowered you to respond a certain way or have limited the way in which you would respond. And so it's just got me thinking about my Elam experience all over
Yeah.
again. What
Yeah.
what did I learn while I was there? What didn't I learn while I was there? And so in some ways the current modern issue has me revisiting places of my past, not to incriminate anyone, but to be honest about the influences, the good and the bad or the neutral, of the places I've been and the people that have been in my life. And so for me, it's really good because of that to have that kind of conversation with
Yeah.
folks for whom Elam has had similar influence and impact.
Wow.
Yeah. Gerald?
Well, I'm honored to be a part of the conversation. Um, I'm sure you all can relate to this that in the role of a pastor, you always don't get to bare your soul in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I cherish all of these moments, that the moments that I do get to engage in conversation, and especially about a topic such as this at a time such as this where it's needed. And when I've engaged in these conversations, they've been healing for me as well, but also enlightening. And somehow, if I allow it to, it softens my heart more, and
Yeah.
hopefully makes it more formative in the hands of God. So,
Mm.
Yeah. I was looking at an article the other day I thought, might help us. The article is by a Christian pastor that is in London. His name's Andrew Wilson, and he wrote a really tremendous article on structural racism. It was published on July 1st on his blog, and he listed 5 ways that racism is systemic. And I wanted to read these, and I think it'll just kind of pop open some of what we felt like we wanted to get to today and talk about in the past, and how God is healing hearts, specifically at our formational time at Bible school. The first one he lists is an institutional racism, and that's collective failure of an organization to provide appropriate service to people of color, or of different ethnic origins. Then another kind is unconscious bias. I think we all know what that was. Keith just talked about being honest about our ambivalence. Sometimes that ambivalence shows up unconsciously in the way we bias people who are different than us. The third one was the legacy that we see systemically of historic injustices. That's what's really been the point, the explosion point, as we all witnessed this horrible video of George Floyd, where suddenly the world is tuned in because of this COVID moment, and that ability to be ambivalent was really stripped away as we're all faced with watching a man die from someone kneeling on him for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So that legacy of historic injustices has been the explosion point recently. The fourth one is racialized assumptions. I think we all know what that is. I laugh. Movies, make money off that. White men can't jump, right? Like that's a racialized assumption, right? And then the fifth one was intentional racism. And I think as a white person, when I hear other white people talk to white people, because we all know we talk differently when we're talking to people that are different than us. We try to make concessions, and we all do that. hopefully we try to do that, right? And we just stay where we are. But as I've heard people talk about this moment, I do hear something that comes up in people, and I think this might be a little bit of where we'll head. There is this number 5, I think, is why most people think of racism. I'm not a racist. My best man was a black man, right? And because we're not intentionally racist, sometimes we think that we're good. But as we go down that list, we see that we're all impacted. We're all impacted by the racism. And as we were talking about this moment, David and Keith and I began talking about things that just didn't hit right for us or for you guys specifically at Elim. Things, listen, that's part of being
Scott,
young, right?
you may need to pause and let folks recover from that statement there, bro.
Say it again. Help me, Keith.
Yeah, yeah. For some people, they probably in disbelief, but anyway, yeah.
You're catching me. Say it again. Help me.
Yeah, your point of, there may have been things that some of us experienced,
Yeah.
particularly Jill, Dave, and I, that were not kosher or were painful.
Yeah. Keep going, bro.
No, I'm just saying for some people to hear that,
Is the stop point. Yeah.
yeah, that's a stop point. Like that, for some, they just lost a layer of innocence, and
Yeah. Thank you.
yeah.
Well, so listen, as even the awkwardness of our moment of Keith going, "Hey, you need to pause on that." There is differences in our perception of what's going on, and as a Christian, as a Christ follower, that I can't be ambivalent about that. I can't be ambivalent about people having a different perception about my love, right? my heart for Jesus, the way we share that. So we were talking, and you guys, Keith was specifically saying a few things, and of course David too. I'm not isolating Keith, and they were truly different perspectives than what I had. We both at times, all of us have felt like things could have been better, but I never felt that specifically about race, and that was being shared, and I felt like we all did. Other people need to hear this.
Yeah. And so I think it probably goes without saying, but we have an appreciative approach, but at the same time are trying to fulfill what Brueggemann would say is like a prophetic critique. We have to name reality. We have to be honest about reality if we're going to move forward. And sometimes that invites us into a place and season of lament as a segue into real and deep joy. You know what I mean? And so as we wade into this conversation, I would just ask and invite everyone to listen with your heart, listen intently, to know that we are endeavoring to be honest, and in so doing, we hope at the points where a critique is offered that it would not galvanize folks and inspire them to come at the institution that we have been so positively shaped by, but that maybe something we share that was pain is mutual. And you can say, "Oh, I had that moment," and then naming it, it can become like healing balm. Just acknowledging it, and so that's our hope. And then, especially as it relates to the topic at hand, with regards to race and racism, and how the institution equipped, challenged, inspired us to expand our capacity to be real agents of conciliation and racial reconciliation. And as I look back at my time at Elim, I think there's more that did not happen that did. So
I was going to ask you too, Keith. Like earlier on, you had said you referred to the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I was just wondering, like, how did that weigh out, for you,
Yeah.
looking back? Was there a balance to that, or did one just weigh extremely more than the other? Um,
Yeah. I think because Elam was such they prioritize relationship. The the school is not huge, so going to Elam wasn't like going to Syracuse or UConn or something like that. You, by virtue of the numbers, did you have opportunity to connect with with the faculty members? And so I forged good, deep relationship with a number of faculty members that I have touch points with even till this day. You know what I mean? I think the times where we had in prayer were so profound was because the people that were laying hands on us were people that we knew and sensed had a deep interest in who we
Mm,
were and who we were becoming.
mhm.
You know what I mean? It wasn't drive by prayer in that
Yeah.
sense. And so those are all powerful, powerful things. For me, I did not really see the places where I think Elam came up short until after I graduated. And
yeah.
I'm starting to read from African American theologians for the first time, and I'm wondering why weren't these people introduced to us in those 3 years where we took almost 100 credit hours of biblical studies and systematic theology? And man, ain't ain't none of us represented.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, um, Gerald and Dave were the first African American missionaries that I encountered
Mm.
while I was at Elam, and I just started to get curious. Are there any folks that look like me going overseas to propagate the gospel? And if so, why was I not made aware of them and their stories more so during those 3 years where we had missions week and we
Yeah.
Mm,
were made to read about the work of God in a global context? Um, you know what I mean? African philosophers and apologists. Why wasn't that became an occasion to undo and reshape a narrative about African American and Black folk contribution to the development of Christianity? And so as I go to seminary and then grad school after that, and I'm being introduced to some of these other authors, I'm encountering people that have extended history,
Mm,
and I'm just wondering, like, man, this doesn't seem like an omission.
mm,
This
Yeah.
doesn't seem accidental. This seems egregious. And so now you're conflicted because
mm.
you've got so much relational investment that you cannot deny.
Yeah.
The way in which my heart has been shaped and my will has moved and much more and how it is I have become more Godward has everything to do with the profound faculty members and staff members at that place.
Mm,
Mm.
But then I've got all these questions about, okay, but what about this? And the deficit is as acute as is the life-giving moments that I had.
mm,
And
mm.
so I've just lived in a tension of that. I've not tried to reconcile it.
sure.
I've just tried. So in some ways, having this conversation may be a means of healing that
Yeah.
or resolving that.
Wow.
So
Wow. Really good. Really good.
Yeah. I'm in a agreement with Keith there. Much of my reflection on my time at Elam has made me aware of things that happened there. But I think for me, when I had never heard of Elam, nobody in my family had heard of Elam. Nobody in my home church. We heard of Elam because a missionary from Brazil came to our church and he preached and he handed me a flyer for TWO, Team World Outreach, to go to a missions trip to Brazil. In order to get to Brazil, I had to train at Elam.
Mm.
And I'll never forget this moment that when I was at Elam, when I set foot on the campus, I knew that that's where God wanted me to be.
Mm,
yeah,
And 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 I say this in the kindest way, it blinded me from seeing all of the other stuff.
Right.
you know, um, and
Yeah.
I say that because I think the blinders were at that time in my life is what's the call of God on my life and how do I pursue that?
Mm.
And so I didn't take time to look at the buildings, because if I had been evaluating on the modern facility, Elam would have lost.
Yeah.
But it was God, if you will, where he
Yeah.
as he tricked me. uh,
Wow. Hold up, man. I think people are still trying to chew on what you just said. Like,
Yeah.
I, how can you equate the call of God to blinders? Because that's what you just did. I don't know if everybody just got that right now, but that's heavy. Woo.
and it's and so getting there, and I think too, it's pre-Elam that in my life of learning to navigate white spaces,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of do what you can do to survive.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until about 6 or 7 years ago that I realized that I was doing so much work internally
Yep.
to just exist or survive.
Mm.
Yeah.
When you walk into a room, you do all of these things subconsciously. You make
Yeah.
evaluations. How many people in this room look like me? How many of them wear the same kind of clothes that I would wear or listen to the same? And you're doing all of this. I don't know. You're making all of these evaluations subconsciously.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask a question. How can I say this question in a way that doesn't offend anybody? And so you're making all of these adjustments. And so I'm more aware of living life at Elam, making those adjustments now
Mm-hmm.
than I was then,
Right.
Yeah.
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 I feel like this is another place as we this is going to be our theme. Let's pause and think about that. Um, I don't think the average. Well, I'm not trying to make a straw man argument here. The concept of white spaces is not universally understood by white folks because it's unconscious bias. It's an unconscious, as Keith said, ambivalence. And
Yeah.
I mean, I remember being.
And practically, it's just a lot of y'all.
Say that again. Yeah,
And practically, it's just a lot of y'all.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, when you're the majority, um, you get the culture. It's just that
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
And and how many of us have heard a black child, or someone who's famous now say, "I saw George Jefferson, and that made me see a black face on TV for the first time, and I thought
Right.
I could do that," right? Like that that's huge. And I've tried to take my kids to Uganda, to get my white kids into a space where they have to feel what it's like to be the minority. And so, Gerald, I think it's really important that people hear this isn't an attack. This isn't, vitriol spewing from your mouth. You're saying you realize now that you were making inner adjustments based on the color of your skin and the culture that you come from because people weren't aware. There wasn't room for you to just be as you were. And
Yeah.
so I just want to hear everyone that's listening. That's not a statement about holiness. That's not a statement about following Jesus. That's a statement based off of majority rule of culture. And so I think this is part of what communities need to be talking about. We need to be coming face to face and just hearing the load that people have had on their back. I mean, that blows my mind that, Gerald, you were carrying a load from just being yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and now I'm aware that, man, like, and sometimes, I've had these moments where, I weep, and it's been more often as of late, of just spending moments weeping, like, oh man, like if I could go back and hug my immature self then,
Mm.
just to ease some of that tension
Yeah.
of, walking down a hall or having, someone make a statement like, "Oh, you black, you get it," or those little jokes. And at the moment, it's a haha, whatever, and you keep going. But it's only so many shots that you could take, right, before it starts to wound you. And I think what's been harmful is not recognizing that I was wounded in the moment.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and only to come back now and say, oh wait, I think there's some pain there, there's
Mm.
some hurt there. And to be honest, what's helped me get at that is watching my kids go through it now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll tell you this, watching Generation Z, they're not going to take it. and they're going to speak up. And so watching that younger generation has pushed me to say, wait a minute, like, why did I put up?
Yeah.
Or why didn't I say anything? Why did I just choose to acquiesce and just go through and do what I needed to do without saying anything about it?
Yeah. And
Guys, I want to hear you others talk. I just feel like people need to hear this. Like I felt that too, but it was from a different angle, and it was never about the color of my skin.
mm,
So I think we all go through those in our maturation process, feeling like unsettled. But what I think we're wanting to talk about today is it when it's on race, we need to get better at that.
yeah.
That can't be on race. We all have insecurities, but they can't be about how we were born. The gift that we're carrying with our ethnicity. So
Right.
I just feel like people need to just pause and hear that again. Yes, we all go through phases like that, but when you are the dominant color in a culture, you don't have to go through that because of your skin.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just, man, I'm just encouraged by this. I think there needs to be more conversations like this. And out of these conversations, adjustments need to be made.
Yeah.
Because, like you just said, Gerald, there is a younger generation that is not able to make the inner adjustments that you made.
Right.
And that has a lot to do, I think, with generations in general. Uh, for us as Gen Xers, um, we're forward tough.
Yeah.
We were taught by boomers to make
Yeah.
inner adjustments, but now you're talking about a generation, Gen Z, that statistically I've read that they're dealing with the highest level of anxiety than any of the other generations. They are
Mm-hmm.
not able to make the inner adjustments that we had to make when we stepped into spaces, stepped into institutions, fully aware that, wow,
Yeah.
I am the minority. Let me rework this right now. That
Yeah.
ain't happening with Gen Z.
Yeah.
That ain't
Yeah.
happening with Gen Z. And so my hope is that those who would listen, that are in a place to be able to cultivate change, would have these conversations, and let's begin to make the adjustments that are needed for the sake of another generation coming up that will not
Yep.
make the inner adjustments that you made, Gerald.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yep. 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 And I would say too, I mean, this is so good. I mean, it's being recorded, but this is so organic and so real. I mean, it's refreshing. I would say as well, because of the retroactive nature and dynamic of pain, that there are, in light of what Gerald said, he's lamenting and
Mm.
manifesting a pain today that was born of a wound incurred almost 20 years ago. And there could be people who would see Gerald and maybe he's just having a painful episode and say, man, what's going on? And this seems to have a lot of energy on that. You know what I mean? I think it's really important that people realize just the way in which this kind of pain, born of racial marginalization, how it occurs. Like
Mm,
you may be receiving someone that for 10 years has habituated into the ability to just I don't want to say assimilate, because there's a lot of ways that assimilation can be understood and misunderstood, but have survived
Yeah.
and navigated space and time,
Yeah.
and have seemed to be okay. And now, in the past 3 months, like, are just coming undone. And for some people, they would say, "Oh, you're just trying to leverage the moment." No, 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 no. This is real pain.
Yeah.
This is me de-stressing 20 plus years of frustration.
Well,
And
Keith,
and
I
I'm
want to,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's more than 20 years.
It
And
is. I'm just saying it is.
it's
Absolutely.
400 years,
It
because
is.
when it's your
Exactly.
story and it's your father's story and your grandfather's
Absolutely.
story, and then you don't know who else's story because you don't have records from your family, like
That's it.
it hits way harder than just it's a collective experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
But
good. Yeah.
yeah, and it's coming out now, and I think for some people, they are perplexed. Man, you never seem to be this angry, or where did this all come from? It ain't just about this moment. This moment has opened the door for a moment of honesty and vulnerability, and it's now coming out. And that could throw some people off, but I just would encourage you, stop trying to to figure it out.
Yeah.
Stop trying to answer it, and
Yeah.
and resolve it, and enter in. So
Yeah. So you mentioned the word lament, and I think lament is difficult for the church at large. It's hard to navigate how to be in lament when we have victorious Jesus. That can be a mind
mhm.
scramble for some people. That some churches, some denominations, they won't allow lament because that's
Right.
we're word of faith, right? Like
Yeah.
that's out there. But also, as we're talking about lament and the need for lament and weeping with those who weep, I really feel like uh, the white majority has a short attention span for lament because that's not the cultural experience for so many. So to hear our black friends and brothers and sisters say, "I'm angry," hits people sideways. They're like, we went to that service 20 years ago and we did that reconciliation meeting. You remember?
At the football
We've
field.
already done the prayers,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
hey, you already know I'm on Team Black. Like, but when
Yeah.
spaces don't change, and what we've been trying to talk about is, even throwing a word out there like tokenism, how efforts to change the space from a white space to a inclusive space, there's all kinds of hiccups that can happen. Tokenism, just like valuing people only for their color. That's what we're talking about when we say tokenism. Um, so can we talk about that? And
Yeah.
how? I mean, we could talk about a lot. I mean, where's that register with y'all? I don't want to force the conversation.
Well, I would say, because first I would say I don't think as a society we do lament well. We have to be taught how to do it. It is odd, it's awkward, it is unnerving, and so we just don't know how to lament. We know how to emote in various and different ways, but not lament as the way I think Jesus invites us into. But to make this specific to Elam,
Yeah.
I think in some ways, uh, Elam kind of underscored this notion of Pentecost, which denied pain. It was during my Elam experience up until, and so in many ways, for every for many of these painful moments, there was also these profound, beautiful moments, and that's just part of it. Because the first person that really taught me lament and has had a life changing experience for me was Brother Stacy.
Yeah.
Mm.
We
And
can certainly
I'm
think
not.
of him when we think of lament. Yeah.
That's it. And I'm not going to go into all the story because,
He's
yeah, I
faced
just
a hard road.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And so just ongoing from, daughter, granddaughter, wife, son-in-law, like just ongoing. And because of my relationship with him, I was brought near to his heart and watched him grapple honestly with that. And he did not hide it. He did not cover it up. He did not mask it. I mean, he was fully raw, and it became invitation to me. Like I have from those moments have considered, like I said, I was not there with Jesus in Gethsemane, but I was there. And when I refer to that, I'm talking about the moments that I spent with Brother Stacy at his house at the time where him and Sister Connie would recall the moment they got the phone call. And I watched them honestly grapple with that.
Yeah.
But the classroom and the chapel was completely disconnected from him. You know what I mean? And so he in many ways was kind of the clear exception.
Mm.
And I'm thankful for that experience because in many ways, I mean his influence in many ways looms large in my life, but whenever I am having a hard time, um, I'm more likely to be honest about it, lament,
Yeah.
because of what I saw in Brother Stacy. And Gerald and I, we and our families have been connected longer and closer for the past 20 years. But I'll call and text and say, "Hey, Doc, yeah, it's getting hard, it's getting hot." You know what I mean? And I'm willing to do that. But it had a lot to do with those experiences. But there was a disconnect between that and what would otherwise happen in the classroom or the chapel and so on and so forth. So my question is, if you did not have those moments with the brother Stacy, what would that have been like in terms of lament? What did Elam did we learn from Elam proper how to properly lament?
Good.
Yeah, I would add
Yeah.
Houston's name in there as well. I mean, just to like Brother Hugh had his first wife died, and I remember taking a class. It was specifically about ministering to the grieving. I don't remember in that class talking about racial lament, but I do remember one of the big takeaways was we should never compare our pain and try to say one's greater than the other. But again, what we're talking about in race, how was that addressed? To my ears, it was not.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, Elam always wants to be about the main things, and I think what's rising right now, even as we hear Gerald share what he did, is one of the main things is people being wholly, wholly given over to the Lord, right? Being 100% in, and when we feel like there's a part of ourselves that can't be because of race, that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. You know, I remember lamenting um, at Elam in our dean chapels, where you were separated,
Hmm.
and Brother Harry would give one of those tough messages
Yeah, yeah,
that would convict people, and then they'd scream out, "I'm sorry, I've been doing this, Lord, forgive me,"
yeah,
um, and it was unto that to that type of holiness where Elam, where you were gonna get broken. Elam was going to break you in
yeah,
terms of your sense of sinfulness. But what I appreciate what you're talking about, there wasn't that context for me, as a black man, to in the presence of God, to be able to lament that those aspects of me experiencing brokenness as in relation to God. I feel like I don't fit in.
Mm.
It reminds me of Moses. Like, God, I'm 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 with the Egyptians here who I'm being raised with in Pharaoh's house, and I'm looking around, and you know they singing these songs, and the way they sing these songs, it ain't enough moan in them. I can't
Yeah.
relate to them. I can't. But when he goes with the Hebrews, he feels something, and he gets something different. So for me, I'm thankful for my faith tradition in terms of Black gospel music,
Yeah.
because in those songs you hear you hear journey in them. Not that other music doesn't have that, but I remember this discussion that we had uh, recently at a church I was at in Detroit, and the song is called "You Made a Way."
Mm.
And then when it gets to the vamp, and they're really jamming, and they say, "We don't know how you did it, but you did it." You made a way. And there was a white gentleman there who says, "Wait, we know how he made the way. He did it by the cross." And what he was saying was, he was thinking that the song was talking about, you know, um, the theological emphasis of Jesus delivering us from sin, but the
Yeah,
song is talking about the hard journeys of life, the ups and downs,
that's
where
it.
we're lamenting, God, how you gonna get me through this?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I didn't know how you were gonna bring me through this, but you brought me through. And so
Yeah.
I think at Elam there was also that kind of deficit, culturally,
Mm.
of being able to express myself, maybe in the worship. I can give the theological assent to the songs that we sing,
Yeah.
but experientially there's no depth for me to bring all of who I am before God. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Oh, it makes
Oh
sense.
yeah,
That
Yeah,
makes a
yeah.
lot
hey,
of
but
sense.
hey, don't forget, my brothers, I tried to fill that deficit by starting that gospel choir.
I said.
I, I tried my best now. I tried.
Hey, and I was making fun of Dave. Listen,
Yeah,
David can be in the dorm room. David, this is just an idea. He's seen the model in Kirk Franklin, and he's like, we can do this.
We
And
can
he's
do
never led a
this.
choir before. And I'm watching him in our dorm room practicing all the moves in front of the mirror. And,
that's it.
and I'm his boy, and I was like, Dave, you are corny, man. You're killing me, And he's like, Scott, I gotta learn, man. I gotta grow.
That's it. That's it. That's it.
But
But here's why that's important, because it's a training institution, and if we've missed that lament class, the majority of our life after Elam, a lot of it has been spent in the
Yeah,
valley.
yeah.
You know what I
I
mean?
mean,
And yeah, I'm sorry.
come on.
Yeah. It's been spent in the valley, and so
I, I,
there's a.
yeah,
Go
keep going.
ahead. No. Go ahead.
All right, we got an overlap. No, what's coming to my mind is I've heard this and I've seen it. The last verse of Amazing Grace at a white church is when we've been there for 10,000 years. But the last
Yep.
verse in a black church is through many dangers, toils, and snares.
That's it.
yes, yes,
That's it.
yes, yes.
That's it. That's it.
So
That's it.
how we even emphasize our songs makes space for one or another depending on their experience.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so true. Good
Yep.
point, man.
really
Very
good.
good point. Very good point.
Listen, at Times Square Church, I tend to be the funeral guy, and there's
Hmm.
another associate pastor that tends to do like all the weddings. And we had a good
Yeah.
laugh. We had a good laugh at one point because I was like, man, I sure would like to do a wedding from time to time. I said, it's just, I don't know why I get stuck doing all the funerals. And then he kind of chuckled real quick, but then he looked at me and goes, well, Dave, honestly, it's because you're willing to listen, and not just listen, but listen to their pain. And then he went on to say this, you don't, when you lament and you empathize with people, you just don't listen to their pain, but you're willing to go to that place where it's very uncomfortable. It's that point where in the natural, you want to call it quits, get up and walk away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you've never put sort of a
Hmm.
timetable to your willingness to just sit and listen to someone else's pain. And I think one of you may have said it earlier, but there is that issue of feeling like sometimes, you know, our our white brothers and sisters want to sort of control the time frame of lament.
Yeah.
And here's where I'll begin with it, and here's where I end, and I'm done. Meanwhile, there's still pain and suffering and hurt. It's almost like how do you respond to those who might be listening to this and going, why are you asking me to lament regarding something 20 years ago that you all are
Right, right,
Yeah.
right, right,
Yeah.
right.
Let alone 400, right?
Yeah.
400?
Yeah, I mean, I hear this a lot too. People saying, you know, my family didn't own slaves. My family didn't do that. Why should I be a part of that reconciliation? I don't know that anyone at Elim has ever said that, but that kind of mentality gets in we're all tempted to try to push that person that we're walking with to our pace. And what I just want to put us back on the track here, not that we're off, but at Elim, Keith, you said it so well. You know, this is ministerial training. This is sending folks into the nations to be like Jesus, the foot washer. You know, who is the King, and learning to walk at each other's speed. I know that's the heart of Elim. I know it is,
Yep.
because they made me walk at their speed to teach me that, right? Like, and I, right? I mean, we did. You're going to go to a week of prayer and you're not going to say anything out loud all week. You're going to be
That's it.
quiet. You know, it's like, woo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think just even the factor that people would watch this, the fact that people would watch this and hear you three, and just to pause and say, wow, like I'm interested in understanding what their perspective was. That's enough right now. Like, but that's enough for the day. And then you have to start that again the next day. You don't just put it away. You know, we got to walk together. That's how we're going to get through this. That's how we're going to grow.
Yeah.
Even when you don't understand it all,
Yeah.
there needs to be a willingness to walk alongside of your brother. I'll say that. I'll say this, Scott. I don't know if you remember, but
Just that you're going to tell stories get me.
That's what y'all get for being each other's roommates.
It was in the middle of the night one night. I was sound asleep. And all of a sudden, I remember
I know where you're going.
somebody just sat on the edge of my bed, like just jumped on my bed, and it startled me. And I rolled over, and it was Scott just staring at me. Now I was like, what is going on? This is the middle of the night. This is like 1 a.m. maybe. And he looks at me and goes, we need to pray. We need to pray right now, man. I just feel so heavy. We need to go to the tabernacle and we need to pray right now. I'm like, can we pray right here? He's like, we gotta go now. I need you to go with me. Without me understanding anything that was going on, without me understanding where he was emotionally, without me getting a clear explanation of why his heart was so heavy, I just threw on something and went with him to the tabernacle. And he goes racing right up to the front and just lays out prostrate. But he looks at me and he's like, I need you to pray with me. I need you to cry out with me. Regardless of how I felt in the natural, like this dude's slightly crazy, some mental health issues.
You there, baby.
But besides all that, I just made a commitment in that moment to just cry out with them. That's all we're asking.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh,
And
man.
that's why lament, I mean, it's an invitation to acknowledge that pain is real.
Whew.
In the end, it's as simple and complex as that. And that's the way of Jesus, not to deny pain, not to ignore it, not to justify it, explain it away, but be in it. And in so doing, that's where we encounter the power of the resurrection.
Yeah.
And it's invitation to say like that, the systems of the day don't do that. This is again Brueggemann. The way of the world is to just gloss it over and to build something, erect something that is fabulous, that will distract you and numb you from the pain and just keep going. But it's exacerbating, and it's exhausting, it's taxing. The soul is crying out for an acknowledgement that I am hurting. And so Jesus shows up to the tomb of Lazarus and says, this is a hard situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he weeps with the community to say, death is a radical break-in
Yeah.
to the life and the call of joy. Let's acknowledge that. You know what
And
I
he
mean?
didn't have to put away being the resurrection and the life.
Not at all, at all, at all. And so we've got people that look like the three of us, especially for 400 years, saying it's been hard. It's been really hard. And we have sang our songs without permission to acknowledge the pain. We have written
Yeah.
our books and our poems without permission because the soul needs honesty. And we've said, would you not try to fix it? Would you join in our song?
Hmm.
Because whatever the solutions are going to be, it's going to be a healing balm that is comprised of I and your tears converging together.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to come, whatever it is. And would you join in that? And I just think I am grateful again. We're talking about Elim. It's hard to lament. I love this story, Dave, because I'll remember when I shared this in one of the recordings we had, but I'll remember whenever I was with Brother Stacy and he would begin to emote, I was just like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I say? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like I just felt like I've got to do something, say something, make something, fix something. And because those
Right.
moments were rather normal, I eventually learned how to sit in it. And in learning how to sit in it, in some way, it helped me to sit, or became a reference for what I needed to do now that I'm a pastor and I'm encountering painful situation after painful situation. It was my time with Brother Stacy that taught me the ministry of presence,
Yeah.
and not to reach for the thoracist or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just think, man, there was something on a bigger scale I think that we missed at Elim. It happened because God's Spirit was present, but I don't know if I think it could have been a little bit better, and it could have, and it could be accessed in this season, especially.
And I'm not hearing Keith or Gerald or David say anything about blame.
No,
I mean, we're
no,
just
not at
talking
all.
about your experience and there
That's it.
being a heaviness, even a grief, if that, correct me if I'm wrong, that as you left your time, you felt like who you are as a person wasn't fully equipped. Is that
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah.
listen, we're all growing. I realize there's things I could have gotten more out of, or I could have done better, or whatever. But again, it was never about race for me.
Well,
Yeah.
let me say this: if you'd ask, so real moment, can I be real?
Absolutely, that's why we're
Yeah.
here.
Okay. So one of the things along this line of lament is what was curious to me, again, towards my third year, and this showed up last week. I just thought about where were the moments where lament could have happened, an acknowledgement of pain along the lines of these racial tensions, especially as they're played out along the lines of black and white. And I just remember, I think it was my second year, there was a huge debate over whether or not we were going to acknowledge MLK Day because it happens in January.
Mm.
There was
I don't
these
remember that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it would have been heard in pockets.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
It,
But
yeah.
the at that time, from a pop iconic standpoint, so much of African American history converges in Martin Luther King. That's a very abbreviated marginal approach to history, but it happens, okay? And so how he is treated becomes a a front for how you would treat all those that he historically represents. And so I
Mm,
remember, I think it was my second year or my third year, there was this question of should we, will we, won't we, and we did it. And we did in my first year nor third year, and this is in January again. You know what I mean? And I'm not quite sure what was happening that second year that made that sparked that conversation. I wish I could remember
Hmm.
the circumstances in our nation because there was something that provoked the question, and I would have known. The reason actually, Scott, this is probably why you may not have heard it because I think it happened at as a student council discussion.
Okay, yeah.
That's probably why. That's probably why it didn't spill out into the broader community because at the student council we were trying to figure out what kind of special events we were going to do, and that came up, and there was the sense was we're not going to do anything,
mm,
and so just last week it came up for whatever reason. That's just the
Yeah.
that's the yeah, that it just came up, and I just thought, man, for 3 years, I don't think we ever acknowledged anyone that white Christians would widely agree is a thorough Christian. I don't think there was ever a moment at Elam where we acknowledged them and their work and how it ties into the redemptive story of God in contemporary time, and how we need to acknowledge them and their struggle, and during the week of prayer, pray, or during these chapel times, pray. You know what I mean? And so there were, like, I think some real easy ways that could have happened, and it didn't.
Hmm.
well, especially considering our Pentecostal heritage,
Yep.
and around Azusa,
That's it.
of what
Yep.
happened there with William Seymour, and then even more so when you look at Bishop Mason, who was the
Yep.
founder of the Church of God in Christ, where this guy was leading a movement where he was ordaining Asian brothers, white brothers, and Hispanic brothers. And at that time, you had some ministers who broke away from him, some white ministers who said, you know what, we're going to start our own thing. And telling the story of how the Assemblies of God started, in response, it was racism. And so
Yep.
we have those moments within our Pentecostal heritage to talk about those things. But those are the ones that I don't remember it being touched upon, at my time at Elam either.
Yep.
Wow.
And so I think it stands out because what I know now is, man, it ain't it ain't that hard.
Right.
Yeah.
It ain't that hard. And because of that, if nothing else, we got to be curious about the why. Why was that? And so when you start to read history and you start to hear how Martin Luther King was perceived and the civil rights marchers were perceived as nationalists and militant and arbitrary factionists, you start to think, well, man, was that why not?
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
did 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 they have those views of him? So Black
You're
Lives
left
Matter,
questioning.
the way Black Lives Matter currently is as a cry and lament is being discredited along the lines of ideological or organizational differences. This trick has often been deployed to discredit Black initiatives, Black humanity and dignity, and so you just have to start asking, man,
Yeah.
Yeah.
is this some of the things that were causing the blind spots or the unawareness? And if nothing else, because it's now rising to the conscious level, you gotta ask the question. You gotta
Yeah.
ask the question.
And
And
Go
and
ahead.
not to cut you off too, but I think it's very complex too, because that
Mm-hmm.
brings up the topic of the Pentecostal tradition and social justice,
Ex-
you know,
that's it. That's
which
it.
is, I don't think Pentecostalism is known for that. Um, and is often, and I would say too that in the Black Pentecostal tradition, back in the day, there wasn't a whole lot of, they addressed issues of racism, but there wasn't a lot of getting behind the civil rights movement, you know.
At all.
And
At
so,
all.
I think I just wanted to kind of point that layer out, that that's there too, you know.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so I even feel like people watching this, you might be watching it, and you still don't want to say Black Lives Matter because of the ideology of the organization. And I just I think we all need to even look at that Good Samaritan story, and if that person on the other side of the road that would have been beaten, robbed, was crying out, they're in pain, you don't run to them and say, well, everyone's in pain, right? You go over to the one who's in pain and you acknowledge their pain. And just, if I could, I don't know how you do this, but I'll attempt to do it. If you're a white brother or sister out there watching this and you've yet to say the phrase because of your fear of what that aligns you with, always err towards love, right? Like always err towards
Yeah.
Yeah.
the ones that I love are in pain. And usually that's the issue. We may not have someone in our life that we really know and that we really, because when you know someone, it comes naturally, right? You
Yeah.
extend
Yeah.
naturally. David didn't wake up in the middle of the night and say, my stupid white friend wants to go up into the tab. No, it's
Right.
his brother. His brother is crying out, asking him to do something ridiculous in his sleepy mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
but because we love and we hear the cry, we extend ourselves. And that's the moment I feel like we need to lead the church and future students who are preparing to be ministers into is even right now the temptation is to see Black America as a sea of faces as opposed to individuals.
Mm-hmm.
That's really
And
good.
Yeah.
we've got to see people.
Yeah.
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 We've got to see people.
You know, shout out to Brother Paul Johansson, who was really key in helping me get through my 2 years that I spent
Yeah.
at Elim.
Yeah.
But he referred to that parable in Scripture too as well, reaching out to me, and I believe as well as some others. But his words were, "May we not pass on by like the
Yeah.
priest and the Levite. May we not just simply go on about our business as usual." And I'm just, I'm concerned about just, even just in the social climate that we're facing right now, and the civil unrest and the tension. I'm concerned that as the dust clears, there's going to be many that are still just going to go back to what we do as usual, um,
Yeah.
rather than continue to really have these conversations, um, and implement sustainable changes that, again, um, allow for men and women of color to feel like they don't have to wrestle with their inner self in order to be able to function in a space where they feel called to. I got to go
Yeah.
back to what you said, Joe, where you were like, you said the idea of questioning and responding to what God is calling me to do was often like blinders as I had to navigate through just this uncomfortable space that I was in. How can we, as places of worship and institutions that are teaching young men and women the word, how can we create spaces where they're just holding on to this calling in the effort to survive and work through everything that in the natural feels so uncomfortable. And then if we bring it up and question that which is so uncomfortable and that which is simply wrong, we're given that charge to be holy as God is holy, and to die to yourself,
Mm.
and holiness calls us all together as one.
So
Don't
Dave, no. So Dave, why you didn't open the door? Why don't you walk all the way through? Because here's the deal. Many of you watching this know that Dave, during his second year, I was there in 95, Scott was there in 95, Gerald came in the second semester of 96, right, Doc?
I only heard of his fame. I didn't
No.
experience his fame. I heard of his fame.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So we left for our junior internship and we came back to campus, and campus was just different. Like the ethos, the mood was just different, and had everything to do with the population of students. They were that up and coming generation, and if the Z generation is totally indifferent towards propriety and standards of operation, that the Segway generation was the one that we encountered when we our junior year. And there's a bunch of kids from New York City, other suburban areas. They were just really just a motley bunch of students that were beautiful expressions of Imago Dei. All that to say, Dave became really fast a mediator. These kids clearly taxed the institution. They took the institution to its capacity. I mean, they had a lot of energy, they had a lot of creativity, and they had a lot of gumption. And they were getting in trouble.
Keith, do you have any examples?
What's that?
Do you have any examples for people when you're saying ideas? Okay.
I'm not Dave do it. So
You said Club Ham? I couldn't hear you. Did you say, I couldn't hear you. Did you say?
Exactly. And so Dave became the person that tried to galvanize these kids, tried to create space for them at Elim, and really contend and advocate for them for faculty folks. And so, Dave, I'm just hearing you resonate with what G's saying about his tension of trying to get settled in the space that was closing in. And there's reason why you resonate with that. And so I would love to hear what that was like for you as you were trying to live and lead and advocate for these students that were just trying to come and be and gain and grow, but were not trying to fit in.
Sure. Wow. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, I was really trying to maneuver around that. Yeah, just not to make it too long, but to give a little context to what Keith is sharing, there is this infamous Christmas party that I wanted to put together, and it was a Christmas party, and I had a DJ come in, and we created.
That's 96.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 96. Yeah.
Yeah. Put together a full playlist. We made it a Christmas costume party, so dress up, be fun, low lights, Christmas lights, food, refreshments, but DJ, make sure you turn up. And so, of course, the playlist was all actually Christian hip hop music. Anything that I could find, Christian rap, Christian R&B, and we were only about 30 minutes in. Freshmen were going, DJ was playing, and a professor came in, and I was actually emceeing the whole Christmas party. So I was trying to keep it alive. Yeah, yeah.
Did you introduce them when they walked in the room?
Huh?
Did you give a shout out on the microphone when they walked in?
So I knew enough that something didn't feel right when this particular professor came in. So I figured, let me just see if he'd like to have a good time. So I shouted him out. Like a good, yes, I did. Like a good MC. Like
Are you serious?
Shout out Shout out, y'all make some noise. Y'all make some noise for shout out. You know, and um, just as, just as quickly as I did that, that particular professor came over and whispered very firmly in my ear, "Shut this down." In my pride and in my arrogance and whatever, I swung the mic over. It was kind of on a mic stand. I swung the mic right on cue, swung the mic right over, and it kind of like spinned right in front of his mouth. And I said, "You tell him it's over," like that.
Ooh.
And so he took me up on it.
Take you there.
And
Mercy.
yeah, and of course that was disrespectful, and I shouldn't have done that. And he shut he shut it down right then and there. And everyone stormed out pretty upset.
Yeah.
Especially our black and brown brothers and sisters that just felt like this was something on campus that they could connect to, that they found to be relevant to who they were culturally, having come up from the city, New York City. And so fast forward, by the next day, some of those students had checked out off campus and hadn't even come back yet. Just feeling like they'd been let down. That professor and I met up the next day and we reconciled, and he apologized for me and in terms of how he just kind of approached me, and I apologized to him for how I approached him. It is safe to say this, because again, I shared it earlier, Brother Paul, I would go running to him. He was my safe place. Brother Paul's my safe place at Elim at that time. And I'll never forget, just really angry and frustrated. And I said to him, I asked him, I said, "What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong?" I said, "I gave everyone an update as I was planning this 2 months out. We put this all together. I made it very clear, blah, blah, blah." He said to me, I'll never forget, he said this. He said, and this is going to be good for conversation or maybe even closure. I don't know. He said to me, "It's not what you did that was wrong. It's where you did it and when you did it."
Mm-hmm.
Now, at that moment, I realized this is an internal adjustment moment for me, right? Like you shared, Gerald. That's why I guess it just resonates so much for me, just as you were sharing that. For me, I was able to make the internal adjustment right there. Okay, all right, yeah.
Right,
Not what I did wrong. It's when and where. Here's where things got messy. I tried to go back and tell the younger class the same thing. "Hey, my brothers, it's okay. It's not what we did wrong. It's when and where. And now we're going to be all right. We just got to keep going because God's called us." And that younger generation said, "It's not when. It's not." They didn't hear that. It's not what we did wrong. All they heard was, "Wait, so when can we do what we normally do culturally?
Right.
And where can I express myself in regards to what I do as a people?" And so for them, there's no internal adjustment. And we had quite a few students at that moment because you could not fulfill the when and the where at that moment. Deuces, we out.
Yeah. I'm fanning you down, Brock. I can feel you having a little moment there. I'm fanning you down. And let me just say real quick, the plot for that thickens a little bit because Dave had did something similar the year before. And we did it in the gym. Remember, like we did like this stomp thing.
Yes.
We did this. We sang the Boys to Men song. You, me, Danny, and oh man,
I know.
Walter.
Walter.
And Walter. Yeah. So we did it just the year before,
Yeah.
and the next year it was that generation,
Oh, yeah.
and it was a totally different response.
We were talking. I think I've talked to each of you, maybe even separately, about this. One of the things that we heard that we were being asked to do at Elam in the name of preparation, be ambassadors of Jesus Christ, was to learn a conformity to Jesus Christ. And
That's
that
it.
word
That's
holiness
it.
is a
That's
big
it.
word for Elam,
Yep.
and I'm grateful. Like I've had many experiences with other groups over the years, and my Elam roots show often that I
Hmm.
can go low when I need to go low, and be quiet, to be second or third or fourth, or not even get my say, because I'm there to serve, and that's Elam's heart. And
Yeah.
I think what we're peeling away is, yes, holiness and conformity is we're all called to go low that way, but it hits us all differently depending on who is espousing that holiness. So I never felt like it was a white holiness that we were being given, but as I hear you all talk about your experience, there is a frustration that you all felt that was different than what I felt. There was a conformity that was difficult for me, that it was that we share, and then there's a conformity that you had that I didn't have. And that upsets me in the sense that I I think Elam would want to know. I think you know as a father, I'd want to know if one of my sons felt like he couldn't be fully present in the house. And
Yeah.
I don't know that you all feel that way now, but as we look back at where we were, that was the feeling. Am I right? Am I near it?
I
Oh
think
yeah.
so. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You
And
know,
and what you're also hearing, and I noticed for G, he hasn't teased this out much, but at least for Dave, Gerald, and myself, we were fortunate to have um, close relationship with some of the faculty members,
yeah.
um, and that is one of the things that may have been God's provision, a saving grace, however you want to put it,
Yeah.
during that time. And and so the question would be then, if you did not have that kind of relationship, what would that have experience been like?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like Dave, Brother Paul, his office became that spot for me.
Hmm.
You know,
Yep.
I remember when I first got to Elam, he was the first person to call me in his office, and he was just like, "Hey, get in here." And that became almost a weekly routine where, he would give me space, to air my frustration, but he would also, give me correction, give me wisdom, give me discipline,
Yep.
and that provided a kind of value that I needed to sustain my time at Elam.
Yep.
But as I'm listening to what's being shared, there's a story that something that happened to me at Elam. I
Hmm.
remember my last year, I kept getting these prophetic words from people, and the prophetic word is God's going to use you to be a reconciler,
Hmm.
and it angered me. I
Yep.
remember it started when at NISM. I'm in New York City, and I came to Elam as a midtermer, and so I'm at NISM, and all these people are saying, "Hey, God's gonna use you as a reconciler," and it made me so angry to the point I was like, "Oh, a black guy in the midst of all of these white faces, God's
Right.
telling you
Right.
He's gonna use me as a reconciler? No, duh, no, duh." You know, and, and it
That's
and
your
then
work to do, not mine. Your work, brother.
and I remember this one night I was with this was back at Elam. I was with Jessica and her cousin. Jessica's my wife. Jessica and her cousin, they're both Puerto Rican. They were at Elam, and we're talking, and I'm venting. I'm like, if one more person come up to me and tell me that God's going to use me to reconcile, I'm going to go off. And we walked over to the Elim Cafe, where Sister Sarah Dodds White would make her muffins. We went over there to hang
Get
out.
real.
Somebody comes in with this paper, and in the newspaper, it's talking about the racism at Bob Jones University. And they sit the paper down in front of me, and they say, "Brother, somebody's got to do something about this." And they slam it down. And at that moment, I'm so angry, I can't say anything. But I think, for me, when I look back at that moment, it's true.
Right.
And I think it's true of all of us. But something about the lack of Elim not being ready or even knowing what to do with us who were not of the majority, still somehow God used that place to form in us or to make us reconcilers. And as much as I want to run sometimes today from that burden, because I'm looking at the pain and I'm doing the soul work of like, Lord, I'm angry about it. Okay, God, heal my heart. God, how do I speak out of this? I think, the whole thing of going back, talking about this stuff and having conversations about this really is getting us back to the heart of God and the call of God on each of our lives. Yeah. And even trying to say, how do we help do something different and bring about a change for this next generation that's coming up,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Coming to my mind as you say that, made reference earlier to, as a black man or woman in America, you don't just feel your own pain, you feel collective pain. And I'm thinking about Elim and the collective blessing that is on Elim, that what we're sharing today, what we're talking about flows out of that blessing of people wanting that next generation to go further and take it on. And I wonder if you all are not, let's get prophetic, your prophetic signs of that, right? Like you are able to even say, I feel comfortable enough to sit down with each other and have a conversation. And we've got someone we want to send this to maybe hit the airwaves of Elim, to not shake things up in a negative way, but to carry that blessing forward so that we grow and we don't repeat the mistake. No, you all saw a gap. And yes, we are all here. We are all here to step into that gap so that others can go farther.
Yeah,
absolutely. I know that's the heart. That's the heart. And I hope whoever's listening to that can manage whatever emotions they may be having that are don't lend itself, don't move you towards, I guess, love and compassionate understanding, if you will. And yeah, that's the heart. That's the motivation for having this conversation. Is hopefully all that this is and all that it isn't can be heard by the Elim family, and what needs to be heard to a person would be, and what needs to be wrestled with would be, and then some beautiful things emerge from that. So
yeah. Well, is there anything else on you guys, your hearts, anything else that we haven't talked about that, we feel like we need to address? Or Gerald?
Man, I'm just grateful for the conversation. Grateful for the time of reflection. And I look back at Elim, and even though I'm able to see the what Keith started with at the beginning of this conversation, even though I'm able to give a critique, I'm able to say, man, I'm changed for the better because of my time at Elam,
Yeah.
and I'm really grateful. And there's another kind of lament that I must be honest about as we end, is that I would love to see more brown and black faces
Yes.
a part of Elam today,
Yeah.
and that's what that's just a yearning I would hope to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
David, Keith.
I would I would just say the same. I would say the same, and I would just actually maybe after we're done, I could present this because that's probably what I want to say. Probably is more suitable for that moment, not this. But um, Jill, what you said, I would echo the same, bro.
Yeah, I echo those same words. And I have to say, yeah, at the end of all of this, I'm still grateful for Elam
Yep.
and the
Yep.
impact that they've had on my life. And not just uh, 1995, but just through the years they have, they've walked with me through some highs and lows, and I'm grateful for just I think too my parents too, who have been a part of the Elam Fellowship community for many years, and I'm grateful for my mom and dad, and just the role that they have played as part of the fellowship and with the school too as well. And so I'm right with you, my brothers, and Gerald, I'm right with you, man. I want to see a greater level of diversity at
Yep.
Elam. Um,
Yep.
and I do. I want to see them rise up to that, and that's my hope.
Yeah, and shout out to your father,
Yeah,
Reverend
Yep.
Gary Ham, because I've had the
Yep.
opportunity to sit with him, um, and to know the burden that he
Man.
bore as a forerunner,
yeah,
Yep.
like much props and blessing to him.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and throughout this conversation, we've highlighted Brother Paul and Brother Stacy. I mean, a lot, but there's other and multiple other faculty members that have been
Yeah.
had such a positive influence whose names we did not mention, and so I just I wanna acknowledge that in them. So
yeah,
Yeah. Again, like as we have that heart for diversity and reconciliation, all that, I think about some of the clumsiness of organizations that attempt to do that, where they finally do get kind of outed as just being token. I know Elam has never been qualified as a place that's guilty of being tokenistic, just picking people for symbols. And Elam is a place where values relationship. So
yeah,
I just I like to end with prayer. Pray together, and Keith, could you close us in prayer? And
sure.
I'll open, and you guys just flow. We'll just flow. So Father, I just thank you for this time together. And awkwardness is a part of this conversation. Where we're awkward, we don't know how to fix things. Sometimes our pain doesn't fit the moment. Sometimes. And even awkwardness can be painful, God. I pray for your Holy Spirit, that oil that you give us, Lord, of relationship, of gladness, of power. Father, cover all these awkward spaces, all the wrong spaces, all the things that are in us that need to come forth and be in your light, Lord. I just willingly just say, Lord, we want to be in your light. We want to walk in your marvelous light. And we want to see that light continue in the place that we've received such great spiritual heritage. So Father, I just bless everyone there who stood up and maybe even not be seen as they have extended themselves uh, for relationship with people, Lord, extended themselves, allowing students in their homes, extended themselves, and maybe even jutted out, Lord, in the name of bringing change forward. So, Father, we just pray for Elam. We say, bless them, bless the students there, bless the new staff with the new president, Antonelli. Father, bless Brother Fred, and may that heart for revival just burn with the reality of who you are, Lord, as something new comes to Elim that is the old thing, but it comes fresh again. It's you,
Yes.
Jesus.
Yes. Yes. Moments like this that in my imagination, I could hear Brother Paul stand up and say, "Sing it, Richard," as a way of ushering in a powerful moment of worship and benediction.
Yeah.
And so we just pause and give you honor and glory for who you are, particularly in how it is you've shown yourself strong in our life through the skin, um, the institution of Elim, that is Elim. And we pray, God, for our friends and fellow students and alumni that as they listen and hear this conversation, that they would be encouraged in as much as they are challenged. And God, we pray for the redemptive potential of Elim to be realized and all that it is to be, all that it is to accomplish on your behalf. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.
All right.